Next on the news.
The rise in food prices crippling customers. I'm Jessica Easthope with the shocking markups and why shoppers say they're frustrated and why owners say their hands are tied.
Prices also affected by the crisis in Ukraine, but could diplomacy be working? Russia now saying it will pull back some troops. Plus, over 1,400 New York City workers have been fired for not complying with vaccine requirements. The fate of another 10,000 still up in the air. And the return of an Easter tradition. Pope Francis announces he will once again celebrate Mass in the Basilica of Santa Sabina in Rome on Ash Wednesday. I'm Christine Persichetti. Currents News starts right now. Food prices are through the roof since the pandemic began, fueling inflation and fraying nerves. The Russia-Ukraine situation threatening to disrupt the global export markets even further. And as Currents News' Jessica Easthope reports, the pain is being felt by customers and businesses alike.
How much is that? Okay, I'm gonna get that. I can afford that.
Tanisha Frazier is a regular customer at the Associated Supermarkets in Bedford-Stuyvesant.
29 or 30. I could do 30.
She lost her mom and uncle to COVID-19 just days apart and says since then, putting food on the table for her and her teenage son
I can't afford this.
has been a nightmare.
So, horrible. It's really horrible. But we still gotta eat and survive.
Inflation in the United States has hit a 40-year high. Financial experts say American families are spending on average $275 more a month. And Goldman Sachs predicts grocery store costs will go up another 5 to 6% this year, after rising 6.5% last year, causing people to skip the grocery store line and instead stand in line at a food pantry.
It's happened at the same time that there's been this large increase in food insecurity and hunger. And so I think we're really worried about what these two trends will do for low-income folks and particularly for communities of color.
The start of the pandemic showed how vulnerable our economy was to a global health crisis. Infectious disease experts say COVID-19 won't go away. The question now is if the pandemic never ends, will prices ever go down?
We need a much more aggressive federal program in challenging monopoly control of a variety of industries, including the food industry.
At family-owned and operated stores like Associated, their struggles are not far off from shoppers.
I received only 3 pallets.
General Manager Danny Liz says every hand that touches the product, from the farmer to the delivery driver, has raised their prices.
We only the messenger, you know. If I get it for $4, I have to sell it for whatever it is to keep the store running.
This pack of chicken cutlets used to cost $1.50 a pound. Now it costs $3.59 a pound. So that means the $11 a customer is paying for this is more than double what they used to. And with factories closing down due to staff shortages and refusal to comply with vaccine and mask mandates, the buck keeps getting passed.
So it rolls downhill, and we're the end of the stick.
Just like his customers, Danny wants things to change. But for now, his priority is keeping inventory and selection up, hoping people continue to shop. That's the bottom line. In Bedford-Stuyvesant, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
Ukraine might be far away, but a Russian invasion there is probably going to cost you even more money here in the U.S. That's because it's not so easy to export goods from a war zone. One, you might have to pay more for gas. Russia is the world's second largest producer of oil, and prices are already spiking. Two, like Jessica just explained, global food prices could increase. Russia is the world's top exporter of wheat. Ukraine produces both wheat and corn. Three, you might have to pay more in interest on your next loan. The Federal Reserve is already hinting it'll raise interest rates. Four, you might take a hit to your stock portfolio. Markets fell Monday when the U.S. said it would close its embassy in Ukraine. And speaking of that move to close the embassy, the Biden administration is stressing that despite it, the U.S. will continue diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the crisis. Cole Higgins has more.
The State Department taking no chances.
There would be widespread human suffering.
moving all remaining diplomatic personnel in Ukraine out of Kyiv and into the western part of the country.
We feel all of these actions were absolutely necessary.
But the U.S. is not giving up on a peaceful resolution. A spokesperson for the Kremlin says Russian President Vladimir Putin is, quote, willing to negotiate.
The path for diplomacy remains available if Russia chooses to engage constructively. However, we are clear-eyed about the prospects of that given the steps Russia is taking on the ground in plain sight.
The White House says they are remaining in close contact with NATO allies and partners about possible next steps.
President Biden has made clear that should there be another incursion into Ukraine, that the United States would respond swiftly with severe economic consequences.
The impacts of the tension felt at home.
Right now, the American people are focused on their pocketbooks.
Fears of invasion sent the Dow tumbling and oil prices soaring, reaching $95 a barrel for the first time since 2014.
I do think the American people will support the use of our economic power through sanctions and some of their taxpayer dollars going to move troops to protect the eastern flank of NATO.
I'm Cole Higgins reporting.
The bishops in the Ukrainian Catholic Church in the United States are asking for peace. The prelates praying for the safety of the Ukrainian people in a statement released this past weekend. The bishops also warning the escalation of the 8-year Kremlin-led war will bring, quote, devastating bloodshed and untold human suffering. They also said the economic and political shockwaves from the devastation in Ukraine will be worldwide. NATO says it has not seen any de-escalation on the ground from Russian forces, despite claims from Moscow that some troops were pulling back. Still, NATO's Secretary General is remaining cautiously optimistic.
The signs coming from Moscow about a willingness to continue to engage in diplomatic efforts, that gives some reason for cautious optimism. But we will, of course, follow very closely what's happening on the ground.
It's unclear how many of Russia's estimated 130,000 forces are being withdrawn. Meanwhile, in the age of social media, the movements of Russian troops are being captured and posted by amateur videographers. This citizen surveillance keeping an eye on the ground. Russian military convoys continue to head in one direction, the border with Ukraine. This one in the Belgorod region, just across the border from Kharkiv, the largest city in the eastern part of Ukraine. News outlets have been able to independently verify all of these movements captured by amateur videographers in Russia and posted to social media. Tanks were seen around the village of Sereteno, about 10 miles from the border. By most estimates, Russia has about 100 battalion tactical groups close to Ukraine. Russian forces are also moving at night in the area. In this case, tanks have just been offloaded from trains. Among the wide variety of Russian hardware being moved forward is Kandar-M short-range ballistic missiles. U.S. intelligence expects that any offensive would begin with an intense aerial bombardment, which would include missile attacks on key infrastructure. There are still convoys making their way south. This one spotted taking a break on the highway south from Kursk towards the border. And later, the same unit is stopped again. Russian troops are trying to stay as dry and as warm as possible, with a growing number of tent encampments set up. Where and when they move next, still very much an unknown. U.S. lawmakers are making moves looking to impose sanctions on Russia if an invasion occurs. Democrats waiting to hear back from Republicans on their latest proposal. Back in New York, immigrants skipped work and school to march on Times Square Monday, joining the thousands of others across the country in the National Day Without Immigrants. The protest was held on one of the busiest shopping holidays of the year in an effort to emphasize the role of immigrants in the city. Demonstrators were also pushing for immigration reform, calling on President Joe Biden to keep his promise to create a pathway to citizenship for 11 million undocumented people in the United States. More than 1,400 workers have been fired for failing to comply with the city's COVID vaccine mandate. Totals include 36 NYPD officers, 25 fire department workers, and 914 education personnel. The mandate survived multiple legal challenges, including an appeal to the Supreme Court by city teachers. The fate of almost 10,000 additional workers is pending as religious and medical exemptions work their way through the system. At the state level, some lawmakers are calling on Governor Kathy Hochul to end all mask mandates in schools immediately. The Senate GOP announcing they would force a vote on the floor of the New York Senate to end the restrictions, calling them irrational and unscientific. Hochul has said that she will revisit the issue after students return from winter break. There's a lot more news headed your way. Families of the 2012 massacre in Newtown, Connecticut have reached a settlement with gun manufacturer Remington, the maker of the AR-15 style weapon used in the attack. Then Pope Francis brings back an Ash Wednesday tradition that's been put on hold because of the pandemic. And this cat trapped on a ledge high above the Vatican gives the firefighters a run for their money. We'll show you how it all turned out. A settlement has been reached. The years-long court battle between the families of the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting victims and gun manufacturer Remington has come to an end. As Daryl Forges reports, the court's decision marks the first time a gun manufacturer has been held liable for a mass shooting in the U.S.
Today is a day of accountability for an industry that has thus far enjoyed operating with immunity and impunity.
Gunmaker Remington has agreed to the settlement with the families of 5 children and 4 adults killed in the massacre at Sandy Hook Elementary School.
Every single day we miss who Rachel would be.
The settlement comes more than 7 years after the lawsuit was officially filed. Remington manufactured the Bushmaster AR-15 style rifle used in the 2012 attack that left 20 children and 6 adults dead in Newtown, Connecticut.
It's not a useful weapon for hunting or for self-defense. It was designed to kill quickly and efficiently.
With Remington now in bankruptcy, families will split the $73 million settlement. Plaintiffs' attorneys say that is all the available coverage that Remington's 4 insurance carriers could pay. The other key part of the deal, the families have gained access to thousands of pages of internal company documents, and their attorneys say they have the right to make them public.
But you are going to get
lawyers for the families claim Remington knowingly and negligently marketed military-grade weapons to unstable individuals.
These families, they would pay everything. They'd give it all back just for 1 minute. That would be true justice.
Daryl Forges, Currents News.
Freedom of speech. It's a fundamental right protected by the First Amendment, but is it being suppressed on college campuses? Charisse Trump, executive director of Speech First and host of the podcast Well Said, is standing up for students' rights across the country, and she joins us now. And Charisse, these days we've all heard the term cancel culture. So explain exactly what it means and how it's becoming the norm on college campuses.
Yes, this is a really unfortunate social norm that we're seeing all across, the country and the world, but primarily on college campuses. And this is honestly where a lot of it began. College campuses kind of create these environments that are really ripe for students to target one another based on how much offense they feel in conversations or interactions. And what often happens is the campuses or the administrators will provide outlets for issues like this through what are called bias response teams and various discriminatory harassment policies, where students can anonymously report one another whenever they feel offended or whenever they feel that they've been wronged in some way, if they've heard an unwanted joke, or if they saw something on social media that upset them. And so this just creates that, we've heard this term coddling the American mind. This creates an environment that is just ripe for that, this kind of tattling, this censorship that students are doing at one another with the encouragement of campus administrators.
I had never heard of these bias response teams. So talk about how is it affecting the learning environment? I mean, colleges are supposed to be a place that's an open forum for discussion and ideas.
So a lot of these students now are afraid to speak up. It's creating this chilled environment where students are afraid to speak their minds. They're afraid to participate in classroom debates because they're afraid that they might actually be reported. We call them censor squads because that's essentially what they're doing to the students. They're censoring what they say.
So if the kids are kind of censoring themselves or the colleges are censoring them at the college level, how does that affect the rest of the country?
From their experiences on campus, they're essentially going to come out with either the self-censorship habit where they're complacent and they keep their heads down, they don't speak up, they don't develop these types of convictions that are important to do so at this time in their life, or they're going to have these like tyrannical tendencies where they are, they realize that the best way to shut someone down that you disagree with or to get your way is to just accuse others in your life of being bigoted or accuse them of being having the wrong opinions and shutting them down essentially. And so you're either getting one or the other, and it's not going to be good either way for our country.
Wow. And just 5 years ago in the Brooklyn Diocese, a student sued Queens College in order to start a pro-life club on campus because it wasn't approved, and she won. So why are administrations even allowing that to happen, not recognizing certain student groups?
Yeah, what a lot of folks don't realize is that the club approval process actually starts with the Student Government Association. And the Student Government Association, oftentimes we see a lot of viewpoint discrimination coming out of there against conservative clubs or organizations, and they try to block the club recognition process for these clubs. And keep in mind, student government associations also get to manage millions of dollars of student activity fees, and they get to determine and allocate where that money goes. So oftentimes we do see them target religious organizations, we do see them target Christian clubs, we see them target Jewish clubs, because a lot of these student government associations are ripe with woke social justice warriors and members of these progressive mobs that really actively try to go after conservative ideas. So oftentimes what you see is it starts at that level, and then the campus administrators and the faculty advisors don't step in. They don't try to put any kind of oversight over the student government. And oftentimes they will use the idea of free speech to defend the fact that they're not stepping in to prevent viewpoint discrimination in these really important cases.
Wow. Well, thanks for the work that you do. Sharice Trump, Executive Director of Speech First and host of the Well Said podcast. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Later this week, Pope Francis will open an international symposium on the priesthood, addressing the relationship between different vocations and reminding the faithful of their responsibility to evangelize.
When Pope Francis talks about the missionary conversion of the church, he wants the entire church to fulfill a mission in the world, because the church has the responsibility of communicating the treasure of the faith to humanity.
The symposium will kick off on the 17th with a conference titled Faith and Priesthood Today and will end on February 19th. All right, not sure if Pope Francis was aware of the commotion happening in St. Peter's Square Tuesday morning, but it got the attention of tourists. A cat stuck on a ledge for more than 2 hours. The Vatican's bravest were called in, but the frightened feline was determined to outwit them. Justin McClellan is in Rome and has the scoop for us. Justin.
Well, Christine, the Vatican's fire department has existed since 1820, but they say they've never seen anything like this. A cat climbing around the top of this iconic colonnade, which surrounds St. Peter's Square.
On what seemed like an ordinary day at the Vatican, tourists began to gather by the columns in St. Peter's Square as something grabbed their attention. It was this cat, trapped along the ledge of Bernini's colonnade, some 52 feet high. The Vatican Fire Brigade came onto the scene to launch a fully fledged rescue operation. Using cranes, they approached the ledge to get closer to the cat. They tried to keep it calm, and this firefighter missed a chance to catch it. It quickly became clear that this would not be an easy rescue. The cat then began wandering freely along the ledge overlooking St. Peter's Square. As the firefighters regrouped, many tourists passed by to see what all the commotion was about. It's a bit surprising to see a cat on a ledge and not know where it entered or how it will come out. To me, it's very curious. I've had cats and I don't know if they have 9 lives, but at least 2 or 3. The firefighters tried to catch the cat once again, this time with 2 cranes and a cardboard box. You could see that he was scared, but they did everything to get that poor cat down. They brought 2 cranes, a bunch of policemen, and in the end it was what I had predicted, that when they went up there, the cat ran away. The cat ran and didn't let them catch him. After nearly 2 hours, the cat jumped from the ledge and landed safely on the ground before being retrieved by firefighters. It may continue to wander around Rome's other tourist attractions, but it surely won't find a more scenic home than overlooking the Vatican.
Well, we're not sure where the cat came from or how exactly it got up there, but eyewitnesses say it appeared unharmed after it jumped from the top of the 52-foot colonnade. Just another example of why they say cats have 9 lives. In St. Peter's Square, Justin McClellan, Currents News.
Well, Justin's right. That cat wanted to come down when it wanted to come down. A tradition returns at the Vatican. Pope Francis will once again celebrate Ash Wednesday at the Basilica of Santa Sabina in Rome. The ceremony will begin with a procession at the Basilica of St. Anselm and will end on Aventine Hill, where the Basilica of Santa Sabina sits. The last time the Pope was seen making the procession was in February of 2020. He celebrated the Mass at St. Peter's Basilica last year due to the pandemic. Still to come on Currents News.
Well, I always believe in angels, and somehow it must have been an angel taking care of the valentine to end up with Claire.
The amazing story of how a Valentine's Day card was rediscovered after 8 decades and the special connection between the sender and the woman who came across it. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Now to one more story about Valentine's Day. A Valentine's note written nearly 8 decades ago recently resurfaced at a Minnesota antique shop. And it turns out the woman who found the card has a special connection to the woman who wrote it. John Lauritsen explains.
There's a little bit of everything. There's antiques, and then there's some new home decor.
When it comes to Pond Road Market in Mankato, Claire Julian is a regular.
This one's from Iowa.
She enjoys making new discoveries among old merchandise, but nothing prepared her for what she found a couple weeks ago.
Someone said, oh, there's a big box of old vintage Valentines. We should go down and look at them.
The card on the very top of the pile stopped Claire in her tracks.
And I turned it over, and I got goosebumps. I'm like, I can't believe this. This is my great aunt Arlene's Valentine. This is what it said. It's, I'm brushing up for you, Valentine.
Arlene Brecky wrote that card to a classmate nearly 80 years ago while attending a 2-room schoolhouse near Vernon Center.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it? At school, we'd make our little boxes, you know, and then your classmates would put Valentines in the boxes.
It's hard to comprehend the journey that little card took over the course of nearly 80 years. How it ended up going from an old country school to a store in Mankato remains a mystery. The fact that Claire is the one who found it may have been fate. The two have a special bond.
The day of my wedding was actually the day of her husband's funeral, which was really, really sad, and I didn't expect to see her.
But Arlene made it for the reception.
It was a moment I don't really have words for, but it meant everything to me.
Now they can share a Valentine's Day made, not with candy and flowers, but with a little card and a little bit of nostalgia.
Well, I always believe in angels, and somehow it must have been an angel taking care of the Valentine to end up with Claire.
It's amazing. That was John Lauritsen reporting. The friend who originally received the Valentine's Day card is now 93 years old and still living in Mankato, Minnesota. Incredible. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.